And with that, I would actually like to turn the time over to Nick Schou, who is the Utah Government Affairs Manager with Western Resource Advocates and today's moderator for the session. So Nick, go ahead and take it away.
Great, thanks so much, India. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, you good?
Okay. So yeah, my name is Nick Schou, and I'm the Utah Government Affairs Manager for Western Resource Advocates. I'm based out of our Salt Lake City office, where I work primarily on climate and clean energy policy initiatives. For those who don't know Western Resource Advocates, we're a nonprofit organization in our 30th year of operations, working to protect the West's land, air, and water to ensure that vibrant communities exist in balance with nature. And I'm just going to introduce our panelists today. I'm pleased to have State Representative Steve Handy. Representative Handy is a Republican from Layton, representing Utah's 16th legislative district that covers parts of Layton, Clearfield, and Hill Air Force Base. He was appointed by Governor Gary Herbert in May of 2010 and has been reelected 5 times. His committee assignments include Chairman of the Political Subdivisions Committee, Member of Public Utilities, Energy and Technology, Member of Natural Resources, Ag and Environment Appropriations Subcommittee, and he is co-chair of the Utah Legislators Clean Air Caucus. Professionally, Steve owns a public relations and marketing communications consulting business. Previously, he was the marketing director for the Deseret News and the Standard Examiner. A graduate of the U of U, he has a bachelor's degree in English and a master's in human resources management. He served 8 years on the Layton City Council, currently serves on the United Way, Salt Lake, Davis County Leadership Council, and on Intermountain Healthcare's McKay Board. He's a member of the marketing committee for the Crossroads of the West Council, Boy Scouts of America, and he and his wife only have 6 children and 17 grandchildren, and have lived in Layton for 42 years. Nick Castagnoli brings over 2 decades of ski industry experience to his role as brand marketing director for Rossignol Groupe of North America, home to iconic winter sport brands, Rossignol, Genustar, Lang, Look, and Kerma. A global market leader in the snow and outdoor segments, the Groupe global headquarters are located in the French Alps, near Grenoble, and with North American headquarters based in Park City, Utah, and Montreal, Quebec. And also have Chris Steinkamp. Chris is the principal at Base Layer, a consultancy helps values-driven businesses drive change through the impactful brand advocacy strategies and consumer engagement initiatives. He is currently leading the Climate Advocacy Initiative for Snowsports Industries America, SIA, and the National Trade Association. SIA is the National Trade Association for the $76 billion winter outdoor industry, elevating the impact of the association and guiding SIA's industry members to effectively address climate change. In 2007, Chris started Protect Our Winters with Jeremy Jones and was the executive director of the organization for a decade, establishing PAL as the preeminent climate change nonprofit representing the outdoor community around the world. And so just before we get into questions for the panelists, I just wanted to address the topic that we're going to be talking about today, because climate change is undoubtedly impacting Utah. According to scientists from Utah State University, Utah is warming at twice the global average and is experiencing extreme high temperatures, declining snowpack down 10% in the last 30 years, ecological impacts like bark beetle infestations and bigger, hotter wildfires. Utah emits more carbon dioxide per person than many surrounding states. And as will be discussed in another panel at this summit, Utah's unhealthy air quality and changing climate hinder businesses' ability to recruit and retain employees. Additionally, many people don't realize that Utah is at a crossroads. And in the next year, we'll have to make important decisions about its energy future that will impact outdoor industry and all Utahns. One of these decisions is whether we want to take on the costs and risks of additional coal-fired power plants, and in doing so, perpetuate the climate impacts that those plants create. or Utah can embrace economic opportunities and environmental benefits of more cost-effective clean energy resources. And you can learn more about that and this decision at westernresourceadvocates.org. So getting into questions, Chris, I'd love to start with you. The winter sports industry is an important economic driver in our state. But warmer winters as a result of changing climate means less snow in places like Utah. What does the future of winter sports look like in Utah if we don't take meaningful steps to reduce carbon emissions? And what is the industry doing to ensure that it is around for a long time?
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks, Nick, and thanks for having us here. As we all know, that winter outdoor recreation is a major contributor to Utah's economy, and winter tourism is what keeps places like Park City in business virtually. But also a large part of our industry is located here. And if we continue to ignore the impacts of climate change, it's going to have a direct impact on companies' bottom line. And frankly, it already has begun to do that. The science tells us that under the current emissions scenario, places like Park City could look very different in just 30 years. And if we don't do anything, by 2100, we may lose skiing altogether, especially at the lower elevations at base lodges and things like that. So in addition to losing their snowpack, as you just mentioned, Nick, we've got warmer, drier summers with more intense wildfires that we're seeing now. This stuff is happening as we speak, and our water supplies are under threat as well. So this is a systemic issue. It's snowpack, it's water, it's drier environmental ecosystems, and it's really something that we needed to address as a systemic problem. But I'm hopeful that our industry, truly recognizes the threat now, which I believe that they do. And the work that we're doing here today and in places like Park City that's going 100% renewable and working actively to address other communities to do the same is going to be a big step forward in addressing this. But it has to be a full industry effort if we're going to succeed. But the way we look at it at SIA is that this is a clear business case. We've got a mandate as a business for action. Our industry and Utah as a whole will become much stronger and resilient if we take action today. And we can't be underprepared for what we know is going to come next. But also on the flip side, our consumers are asking for it. So your consumers, everybody that's on the call now that works for a brand, your consumers who buy gear, want their favorite brands to take action on this issue on their behalf, and they want us to lead on this. So it's a moral imperative for sure, but it's also a business case as well. And I think the snow industry is coming around. It's just got to happen with a great deal of urgency at this point.
That's really great. Thank you. And Nick, Rossignol is one of the biggest companies in the industry and located here in Utah, one of your offices. Can you talk a bit about what you're seeing firsthand and how Rossignol is responding to the seasonal inconsistencies brought about by climate change?
Hey, Nick, you're muted.
That's twice now. That's two demerits. One more and I'm just going to hang up. No, thank you, Nick. Nice icebreaker there. Our company moved to Park City, Utah in 2006, primarily because of all the incredible access to the mountains and our playgrounds, just so close to Salt Lake City International Airport, makes launching our products into the marketplace so much easier when we can bring people to our offices, show them the product, take them right out on snow in our backyard. So it's an incredible playground that we don't take for granted, and a huge component of our success and our business, I believe, to this day. We're certainly on the front lines of climate change. We see the changes in the seasons and the changes to the mountains around us firsthand. In our business and those of our partners are intimately tied to the health of the planet and the climate. So for us and the industry as a whole, snow is really our currency. As a home to a portfolio of winter sports brands, which you mentioned, Nick, Rossignol, Dina Starlang, Look, we're a leading manufacturer in winter sports equipment around the world. And with that, there's a seasonality to our business. We only have about a quarter of the calendar year to really engage with our end consumers and generate revenue. And obviously the climate plays a massive role in this. So there's quite a bit of pressure. There's quite a bit of motivation for us to be engaged in these conversations and to do whatever we can as manufacturers in terms of advocacy and moving the needle forward in the right direction in terms of manufacturing, logistic processes, and our overall operations. On the low tide years, we feel it. We feel it on our bottom line. The communities feel it. But we can also say with confidence when there's an abundance of snow, or when we're even in an average year, the communities are active, they're engaged, people are happy to go out and put their money and invest into this activity. So, we've done a lot of things over, a decade plus, more quietly behind the scenes, I would say. As Chris probably knows, we were one of the first to write a check for Protect Our Winters in 2007 when Jeremy was an athlete of ours. And in terms of what we're doing at a manufacturing level, we're really beginning to integrate this ethos and approach into everything we do: manufacturing, logistics, operations. We're looking more closely at our product life cycles, our partnerships, to have a more positive impact across everything we do.
That's great. Thanks, Chris. And Representative Handy, you've been a strong champion on air quality and clean energy in the state legislature, and last year sponsored the Community Renewable Energy Act legislation that makes it possible for municipalities to achieve their goals of having 100% net renewable energy by 2030. This was really first of its kind legislation, and now some 23 Utah municipalities have opted in. Can you talk about why addressing air quality and carbon emissions is important to you, and explain what you're working on right now?
Well, yes. Hello, Nick, and to everyone. I'm just really happy to be part of the panel this afternoon. That is a topic that could be undergone for a long time. But let me just say this, in Utah, we are part-time legislators. And when I entered into this public service some years ago, I thought to myself and looked around and decided, one day I'll be done with this. Either the voters will throw me out or I'll decide to be done, and whichever comes first. And what is it that I might be able to do that would make any kind of a little difference? And I decided that that embracing the new energy economy, I call it, that has to do with the subject we're talking about, climate change, has to do with the subject of our air quality that we can have some very terrible problems with in the central part of the Wasatch Front area of our state. And so I started working in these areas, and I've had some success. I wanted to tell you about this particular bill that Nick's talking about, HB 411, Community Renewable Reinvestment Act. It really is a groundbreaking thing, because what happened was that Park City, Salt Lake City, and then unincorporated Summit County, they'd been talking for a number of years with Rocky Mountain Power. And they wanted to move towards a renewable portfolio, but it's expensive, and you can't just flip a switch, so to speak, and do it overnight. It takes time to transition. And Rocky Mountain Power, to their credit, entered into a good faith discussion to figure this out. How can we best serve our customers? We know this is where our customers want. This is where the market is going. This is what we want. We want to move decarbonization. We have lots of forces and pressures on us as a big company, of course. How can we do this? And so they got to an agreement, pretty much. And I was privileged to have the bill come to me, and I was really excited to do it. It was a very tough bill, but what it allowed, and it was actually in 2019, Nick, and what it allowed was that a community could sign on with a resolution by the end of December 2019 that they wanted to opt in to the program. And so there, as you said in your introduction, about 24, 25 communities, a couple have decided, that they can't do it, opted in, and they're now in a process here this time later, a year and a half later, I guess, still looking at the rates and how this would work. Rocky Mountain is working with them. They want to get to a point where they can get to and go out and then develop vast new resources for renewable energy. And I think it's very, very exciting. It is groundbreaking. I've done interviews all over the country about this piece of legislation. It's been very, very fun to be involved in this. and it's moving forward. And Nick asked me to tell you a story that I'd like to tell, and I had a Republican colleague of mine said, Steve, how come you're involved in all of these things? And I said, look, it's because my constituents, my family, my grandchildren demand that we are involved in these things, in these particular public policy areas. And this is not easy. We have to navigate this, but we have to do it. As Chris, I liked what he said. We have to really do this more expeditiously, and we have to ramp it up. We have to get going with this. We've been dawdling too long. So with that, we can talk about many other things as well.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, it's your constituents, you know, and it's Chris's customers. And we at WRA, we actually did some polling last year with the help of Dan Jones, and found that public support in Utah for clean energy, this clean energy transition, is really high, and is actually by a margin of 20 percentage points. So there's broad public support when you really get down to it. You know, and Utah prides itself on being a business-friendly state. Policy decisions around carbon emissions have major implications for important industries like the $12 billion outdoor industry. But I mean, Representative Handy, going back to you, why is it important for businesses to engage with decision makers, utilities, and regulators to advocate for emissions reductions in clean energy, and what impact can they have?
Well, this is this is kind of, I mean, it probably should be self-evident to everyone, but policymakers and business interests and individuals need to come together. We have a challenge here that can't just be solved by, certainly don't count on government to solve it. You know, it's got to be something that has got to come together from various parties. And so I'm so happy to hear, you know, Nick talk about Rossignol and other companies who have stepped up and put their money where their mouth is, and also in the area of advocacy. And so I think that we as human beings understand that if we speak more with a united voice and a common voice, and there are lots of segments to this, of course, but the overall goals, we're going to get more done than trying to be out there on our own.
Great. Yeah, and I mean, Chris, I know that SIA has been really engaged. Can you talk about what SIA is doing to engage decision makers around climate and clean energy, and what can companies that are concerned about the impacts of climate change do to make a difference?
Yeah, totally. So, you know, we see, as I mentioned earlier, we see addressing climate change as an opportunity. You know, it's a threat, but I think we've got to reframe this to our industry members and our businesses that we represent as an opportunity to strengthen our industry for the future. You know, I think what we've all seen over the last 4 or 5 months with the pandemic is that, you know, we were unprepared, and we can't let that happen again. You know, we have the luxury of knowing that climate change is going to happen, and it's already started to happen. And for an industry that relies literally 100% on a consistent and strong environmental ecosystem, we can't let this thing slide. And so, you know, we see this as an opportunity to build a strong foundation for the future, and that's why we're in it. You know, we all want skiing to be around forever, and we need to take an offensive view of climate change to say, hey, look, we're going to lead on this, and we're going to strengthen our industry and make it more profitable. And, you know, a few years ago, people saw climate change as something that's 30, 40, 50 years down the road. But to us, it's not really a long game anymore. It's here. And so to that note, you know, advocacy is really, really important. You know, we lean on partners quite a bit just because of our size and our bandwidth. But we're working at the state and federal level on our advocacy work. You know, as the trade association, we realize that we have a responsibility to be the voice of this industry and to lead the business voice and our member companies to be really active as much as we can on advocacy work, which is a very specific expertise. So at the federal level, you know, we're working with the Outdoor Industry Association and the National Ski Areas Association to elevate our collective voice on climate. You know, together, you know, I think a couple of years ago, we realized that all 3 of our trade associations were doing the same thing and very concerned with climate change. And it would make a lot more sense if we collaborated and united the voice of an $887 billion outdoor industry to push on federal climate policy. So we've come together to really form this alliance between the 3 major trade groups here in the US to drive bipartisan agreement on climate at the federal level. So that's what we're doing on federal advocacy. But at the state level, we're active as well, especially in places like Utah and Colorado. And we work with organizations like WRA, for example, to strengthen our members' voices in their regions at the state level where they really have some influence. When the governor gets a call from the head of Rossignol, for example, that phone call is going to be picked up because of Rossignol's impact in the economic market, their social influence in Utah. So we're writing op-eds and we're asking local elected officials to recognize the economic driver that the winter outdoor industry is to drive state policy. For example, we're taking the lead from WRA on all of this to ask our utility companies to provide clean energy in our markets. And for example, we're circulating a letter right now that is asking Pacific Corp to stop adding additional fossil fuel energy to Utah's clean energy mix, which is incredibly important. It's going on right now, and all of us should be aware of what's going on. So we're trying to rally the outdoor industry in Utah to be aware of these things and to take action. And I think it's really, really important. And I think businesses in Utah have so much at stake, but have a really powerful voice, especially at the state level.
Yeah, that's great. I agree. I think businesses have a really powerful voice, and we at WRA, we're really engaged in the utility and policy arenas, and we really value the contributions from our business partners in various industries, not just the outdoor industry. And among those is, SIA and Rossignol, who both worked with us during the last legislative session. And Nick, going back to you, I'd love for you to address that question as well about what Rossignol is doing, because I know you're engaged on many levels, but there's also things companies can do internally to show that they're serious about addressing climate change, which you touched on a bit earlier. Can you tell us some more about what Rossignol is doing? Any of the things you'd like to talk about, whether it's engaging in bigger platforms or even your Respect platform?
Yeah, absolutely. Our senior leadership team, this is a passionate point. We do have, and we've been trying to round out our portfolio to be or to be less dependent on the seasonality of our business, with the launch of a new bike division and some more summer activities in apparel. But to be clear, winter is that's our DNA. That's kind of just our lifeblood, and so this is really a passionate point for our senior leadership team. Our CEO Bruno Cerclay in France has been very actively involved, attending the 2015 Paris climate summits. Francois Goulet, our current North American president, very involved, traveling to Washington to be a part of business climate summit panels. Involved in writing op-eds on, the Salt Lake Tribune. We're really focused on making sure that our brand is a voice in this conversation, and being involved with partners like POW, where we can help to accelerate those partnerships. Last year, we were able to bring that to a more global level. Those are all things in terms of advocacy and letting our voice to this fight that we can do, and it's not a matter of necessarily disrupting your manufacturing, your operational workflows, or extending a lot of extra dollars, right? But at a certain point, I think you do have to start to put your money where your mouth is, so to speak, and you need to act accordingly. And so again, we've had a lot of different actions that our group has undertaken over probably the past 10 to 15 years. We introduced one of the first environmentally or eco-friendly skis in 2009 with the Attraction collection. We won an eco-responsibility award at ISPO in 2012 for our express binding. In terms of just manufacturing and logistics, we've deployed a lot of new things over the course of that time that, behind the scenes, they're little puzzle pieces that we're plugging in. It's a big machine, obviously. It's a big rock and a really steep hill. So you got to just kind of slowly chip away at this. The one thing we hadn't done over that period is really given much of a face or a voice to it. And I think, that's for a number of reasons. I think we've just been focused on trying to keep our business running. And there's certainly many challenges in winter sports. relative to climate and the economy that impact us. And we're trying to keep all of our employees at work. We're trying to keep the lights on. But at a certain point, to Chris's point, we need to be able to show face to these things because our consumers demand it. Our retail partners want to know what we're doing. And I think there's an expectation today that you're going to have a certain level of transparency with everything you're taking on. And so with that, we have accelerated a lot of things we've been doing over this period, but we've also given face to it with the launch of our Respect program, which you mentioned. And Respect is really a four-pronged approach for us to speak more confidently about the things that we are doing, the products we're introducing, and really it's a new guiding light for our group. Again, this has been important to us for a number of years, but it's now become more integrated into everything that we do in terms of how we approach partnerships, how we approach our suppliers, how we manage our logistics and operations. This environmental eco-conscious sort of mindset is really kind of starting to blanket every approach. So we've set some lofty goals with that in mind. We've announced a goal of a 40% reduction in waste by 2025, a 30% reduction in carbon footprint by 2030. It's carbon footprint, it's minimizing our energy consumption, optimizing logistics, being selective with suppliers we work with. We're proactively implementing the new processes and protocols to really consider the full life cycle of our products that we're bringing to market, and accelerate the use of recycled materials in everything we do, and supporting and providing opportunities to our employees to get involved and partner with climate-minded outlets. So some new exciting things that we've also done in terms of product design is we're accelerating the use of the natural and recycled materials with a new collection of skis we're launching this year. It's the trunk of our tree here in North America with our Freeride line, and that's the Black Ops collection, which will replace the 7 series. We're using all FSC and PEFC certified wood cores. We're using all recycled edges, 100% recycled edges, recycled base and top sheet materials. And this is a big bulk of our collection. When we get to next year's product cycle for 21-22, we'll introduce another new collection that takes this exact same approach. So you're really going to see a much more eco-conscious approach to a lot of our product that we're bringing into market going forward. We actually had a project just this past season that we got a certain, we got down the development cycle to a pretty significant degree and realized that it wasn't going to be real feasible to recycle this new product. And so we went back to the drawing board and we built a new boot that was going to be able to break down a lot easier. Even in our apparel range, we're using materials that are certified by recognized labels, and we're implementing new processes. We've got a new Freeride collection of apparel called Atelier S, where we use a Sympatex membrane. That's 100% recyclable. It's free of all abusive chemicals. It's Blue Sign certified, and that's a whole new range that we're bringing to market this year. So those are, in addition to, things like reducing our plastic and paper packaging, simplified constructions, limiting the ink that we use. Those are some specific things that we're bringing to market this year that consumers can go touch and feel on shop walls today. Within our factories, we own 3 factories in Europe, one in Sallanches, Arthez, Montebelluna. We've achieved a 97% reduction in water consumption in our factory in Sallanches. We've installed heat recovery systems in all those factories. We've had massive reductions, I would say, in energy consumption overall in those factories, but we've also transitioned to 100% of that electricity coming from renewable sources, installing 200 some solar panels within the past couple of years. It's a pretty robust platform. I could sit here and kind of go on and on about it. You can learn a little bit more about it on our website for those listening that would like to learn more about it. But it's also extending across to our partners and suppliers now as well. We've created an ethics charter wherein we're asking that 100% of our suppliers sign on to this charter, and we're going to audit them 5 to 10 times each year to make sure that they're within compliance, and anybody who's not within compliance is going to no longer be a supplier. So a lot of things within it, and we're pretty excited to be able to give a little bit of a face to it. I think And fortunately, when you do begin to speak on some of these topics, you open yourself up to critique. But it's a matter of, I would say, to steal from Protect Our Winners, progress over perfection. And we've got to start somewhere. And I think we've got a lot of groundwork laid here, but a long ways to go as well.
That's great. Thanks, Nick. Not that I needed a new reason to want a new pair of Rossi skis, but now I really want the Black Ops as a climate nerd.
Yeah, I just got done with the marketing presentation, so I had to get the sales pitch in too. Sorry.
No, that's great. And, just something really for all panelists, Utah's outdoor industry and others, are experiencing climate impacts and dealing also with the economic challenges from the pandemic. We've talked about actions that you all are taking. What do you have to say to Utah's outdoor industry business owners that may be on this call that aren't engaging in climate yet?
I mean, I can jump in because I was kind of touching on it. I think it's such a big challenge, right, for a lot of businesses. They don't really know where to start. And within winter sports, I would say SIA is a great resource if you do have questions or you want to know where a great place is to start. That you could always reach out to SIA and find some maybe easy solutions to begin that conversation. But you just have to start somewhere, and you can't be afraid, and you can't get hung up on being 100% perfect right out of the gate. You have to just be focused on moving that rock slowly up the hill and getting to a level where you're making a real impact and you're making some real commitments, right? Like I said, this is everything that I just rattled off has been 10 to 15 years in the making. It doesn't just happen overnight, and the more we can get other business leaders involved, whether that's talking to their local representatives or helping to drive legislation through, or changing how they approach their own businesses. Just get started and roll up your sleeves and don't try not to get overwhelmed with what an immense task it is, and start to chip away at it.
Yeah, I just want to add to that too. To what Nick just said, like, you just got to get involved. You got to take the first step. And, it doesn't matter whether you're a big company or a small company, it's all the same. You've just got to get involved and do something that's meaningful. Focus your efforts on reducing your carbon emissions. Get involved in advocacy, either the state and the federal level, but also look at your company and how, to Nick's point, I mean, they're rethinking their products, and how is your business strategy? How should that change? But again, it doesn't cost anything to write an op-ed. It doesn't cost anything to pick up the phone. So if you're a small company or a big company in Utah, it's got to be an imperative for your business. But also, again, your consumers are asking for it. So if you haven't realized that yet, and you haven't gotten involved because of that reason yet, either you're kind of already behind the 8 ball. But we know it's a big mountain to climb, and it's really hard work. But it's really what's needed now. We just can't ignore this any longer, not even just one more day. And, I think most of us who have been on these panels before have, talked about the impacts and what's coming in 10, 20, 30 years. But this is happening now. And we can't leave this panel with just another, as an awareness builder. This has to have some action that comes from it. So when you guys leave this panel today, if you're a business owner or if you're a consumer, ask your brands that you like to get involved in climate and think about what you can do. Take a look at WRA, take a look at Protect Our Winners, join those organizations. We're, as the trade group, for our business members, we're going to launch a platform in October that's going to give our members a really clear path forward and an achievable roadmap to meet the science-based targets over the next 30 years. So if you're an SIA member, I hope you'll join us. But there's a lot of things that you can do starting today, and I really hope that you will.
Representative Handy?
Yeah, Nick, let me just weigh in. Those are such great things. I was telling you about that my energy renewable bill. So last summer I had the opportunity with the U.S. Department of Energy had heard about the bill, and they invited me to Washington to make a presentation, to be on a panel like this about it. And I went to a few other sessions, and they had the head of Delta Airlines was there, this Bastian guy, and then a top executive from Hilton, and they were talking about these giant corporations. They were talking about their sustainability initiatives and efforts, and it was mind-blowing to me the progress that they're making in reducing waste. And there are lots of small companies out there, and I recognize that not everyone is that kind of a size company, but you can kind of do something. Everyone can do something. Nick, I was really impressed about how that you had committed your suppliers, and you actually audit your suppliers with their sustainability initiatives. I mean, I think that is a wowzer to me. Now, not everyone can do that. Not everyone has your company's resources, but everyone understands you can do something. But I like the fact that Chris was talking about join a trade association, get best practices, get guidance, get help.
Yeah, and as somebody who does advocacy, I think I hear from a lot of people sometimes like, oh, I don't go to the legislature because they don't want to hear what I have to say. And I just think that's totally wrong. I mean, there's so many people up there like Representative Handy and others that want to hear from you. They want to get the input from people, and they want your knowledge and your perspective. And that's really when you're part of processes up there that really get a lot of people to the table, they tend to be the better ones. And also just at WRA, we have a lot of different ways to get businesses involved that want to, small things, big things. And it's really helpful for us to get to work with other businesses. One thing that we think a lot about is that as Utah's traditional energy system undergoes a transition to clean energy, we want to ensure that families and workers in rural fossil fuel dependent communities can prosper as well. Do you think, this is for all panelists, do you think there's a role for Utah's outdoor industry to play in the economic diversification and in providing meaningful opportunities in communities dependent upon traditional energy industries?
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think if we can address climate change, now the outdoor industry will continue to grow and continue to prosper. And this goes back to that resiliency point I made a little while ago. This is what it's all about. Can we create good long-term jobs for those that need it here in Utah? Absolutely. So, whether it's in the booming renewable energy sector or directly in our industry or in the ancillary winter outdoor tourism sector, the more effective that we are in addressing climate change, the more opportunities that we're going to have in the future to those that need them. So again, this goes back to this opportunity, and it's an opportunity for all of us to drive our businesses forward and to bring a lot of people along with us.
Yeah, let me just weigh in here too. I think that's exactly right, Chris. But I think that there's in the rural parts of our state in Utah. I mean, Rocky Mountain Power has two big plants coal plants at Hunter and Huntington, and they are moving towards decommissioning. It's out there a few years, but they are moving towards that. But Rocky Mountain Power has, and I sound like I'm a stockholder, and I'm not. But I was on a panel with the head of in Park City a year ago, the head of the CEO, Gary Hugavine, and they had just come from Wyoming, where they're going to decommission that big Jim Bridger power plant. I mean, and they're going to put resources themselves as a company into that little community of Kemmerer, Wyoming, that's going to be really devastated by that, and try to figure out a transition for these workers and these people. They deserve an enviable. I heard someone say one time this: people who work in the coal industry, the miners, and they haven't done anything wrong. Okay, this is a generational thing. They know that they're in a time of transition, and so we collectively, as a society, government, industry, ought to be able to look for ways to transition that. And southern Utah, I mean, that recreational opportunities are unbelievable, as we all know, and there have to be ways, and there are smart minds trying to figure this out in this transition time.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. We really need to keep in mind that these are important communities, and that really, our thriving economy on the Wasatch Front has been built on this reliable and cheap energy produced by other regions in Utah. And I know from talking to many of the local leaders down there that they're, very engaged in trying to work on this transition and do what their community needs. And It's been really great. Well, I'd love to ask the panelists if they have any other remarks that they wanted to make, and then maybe India, we could get into some questions from the audience. Okay, I'll just open it up.
I saw that Kate had a question about the data that I had mentioned about the consumers. Kate, you could email me at csteinkamp@snowsports.org and I could send you links. But off the top of my head, there was a Cone communication study that was released in 2017 that had some really good data about that. But I have some others if you want to email me as well.
Great. I did have one other thing that's come up several times is that, Chris, you're talking about how you're hearing from customers what they want, and Representative Handy, you're talking about you're hearing from your family and your constituents about how they want these things. Do you have any specific examples where maybe you didn't really realize that something was so important, and then being engaged directly by just average people really changed and made a big difference in your perspective?
Yeah, I do. I can give you a quick little case study. So I'm a native Utahn. I was born and raised along the Wasatch Front. These notorious inversions that we've always had are just kind of a part of life. I didn't really understand the science behind it. That because of our growing population and car emissions and everything like that, that it was harmful to health. I mean, I knew a few people, asthma here and there, and so forth and so on. But I had a constituent call me and several years ago, and he really brought me up short. I was really out of line. I want to tell you, I'm going to admit it. But he said to me, he was yelling at me. I didn't even know him. And that we had a serious inversion. He said, Representative Handy, he said, what are you going to do about our poor air? And I thought, this is one I need to pull over. So I pulled over, I pulled over. I'm talking on a cell phone, of course. I pulled over and I said, what do you expect me to do? I can't run a bill to move the mountains. And that was a flippant remark on my part. And at that point, he really let me have it, and I deserved it. And I really listened to him, and I thought to myself, wow, I need to get myself educated. So I started really educating myself and looking for opportunities. And really it was the education and the data that has driven my thinking about policy and figuring, well, there are some things that you can do, in terms of as a policymaker. And so that's been really exciting. It's been the best part, frankly, of my public service, to be involved in something like this that, as I said in my introduction, that I think can have really some long-lasting effects after I'm long gone from public service. So that's my story.
I was just going to add too that I used to live in California, and we had about 4 years of a really, really bad drought, and there were a couple winters in there where it just didn't snow. And there are some resorts just outside of Los Angeles, like Big Bear and Snow Summit, that even in a good year, it's tough to get snow. And I just went up there one weekend to see what it was like, and literally every shop in that town was closed. Every ski shop, every restaurant, everything was shut down, including the mountain. And while the mountain had like a very small ribbon of man-made snow that was melting fast. And I just realized, this is not something that is a nice to have. I mean, climate change has real serious economic impacts. And I think that's when it hit home for me. Like one of the many times that it hit home for me, just to see people that are out of work and towns literally shut down.
Go ahead, Nick.
Oh, I thought Chris hit on a strong point there with regard to the broader effects of climate and its impact on the communities that are supported by the resorts, right? So outside of just selling skis and lift tickets, this is such a critical issue for all those small ski town communities that rely on that traffic. I mean, I think we're seeing some of those effects due to the current virus situation as well, right? Seeing communities get shut down. You're seeing college football seasons getting canceled, and there's communities that are tied to doing a lot of business during college football season. And it's a similar thing here with climate and winter sports. And when the product dries up, which the product is the snow, the business goes away with it. I saw a question in here in the feed regarding private vehicles and the contribution to air quality, and how companies in our industry could get more involved in encouraging people to carpool or take public transit. And I thought that was a good point. I mean, I know the resorts are generally pretty actively engaged in that conversation, due to limitations that they have in their own parking lots and such. But haven't really seen that coming from our corner, and I think that's an interesting thing that we could help to encourage as well, and use our platforms to speak to that. So, thanks, Olivia. That's a great point.
Great. Yeah, thanks for answering Olivia's question. I was just going to ask that, and there's a really good question from John that just came up, about supporting rural communities. Are there any good specific ideas out there that any of the panelists have heard about how government or outdoor companies can support communities' transition to green energy? And are there examples from elsewhere that have been successful? I have a few thoughts, but I'll let any of you respond if you're interested.
I'll let you take it.
Well, you don't have to look very far, because Park City has done a really good job of it. They committed to going net zero by 2050, and they've taken the lead on being one of the communities in the outdoor world, but also in kind of the smaller community level that has taken a stand on climate. And so, but I don't think they would have gotten there without a lot of participation from outside groups. So people showed up at community hearings, and companies weighed in on it to show that there was, again, like a business imperative for that town to take the lead on this. And I think, once that groundswell of public opinion swelled up, then Park City realized that it was the right thing to do. And they're setting kind of the template for other communities to do the same, because once they figured it out, that template's easily translatable to Crested Butte and Parks and Telluride and other places. So they've created kind of this momentum of communities being able to go to net zero now, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, and in addressing that question, as well as the question posted by Daniel, for economic transition strategies for rural areas that are dependent on traditional fossil fuels, it's generally not as simple as just saying, oh, we're going to build a bunch of renewable energy there. Those aren't the same kind of jobs. They don't pay the same and employ as many people. It's not that simple. And really having a diverse approach is what has been most successful in other areas, and it's really, there's a lot of places that are just now tackling this throughout the West. But it can be things like Representative Handy mentioned, tourism and expanding outdoor recreation opportunities. It can be manufacturing, and so from an outdoor industry perspective, there's really good, talented people in these communities, and I know Chris and I have even met some of them down in Carbon County that are working on kind of, creating a local product manufacturing hub. And then there's, the tech industry, which in Utah, Silicon Slopes has pledged to help bring some jobs down there. So I think that as we look to this in the future, just like the kind of approach that Rossignol and Nick was talking about, that they're taking to climate change, just really looking at every piece of it. I think with supporting these communities, it's very much the same. And so this is another question for Representative Handy. You mentioned talking to a Republican colleague who asked about why you were interested in working on climate issues. How do you approach those who still think climate change is not a real issue? And is that sort of opposition something you come across a lot?
I see that question from John. It can be certainly a polarizing issue, and when you get polarized on something, you don't get anything done. So I think that it's for some individuals, it's a go slow kind of a thing. I think particularly in Utah, it's the more of these rural legislators who want to protect jobs in coal country, if I can say that that are most resistant to thinking that. I mean, you don't have to be a scientist to know that something's happening with our warming, and that way. So it's just really a matter of ongoing education. There's no real way to get through that, but just you just have to be patient and present people the facts.
Yeah, and probably not yell at people over the phone too, right? Like the one person talking to you. Let's see. I have a question from Donna that I don't totally understand. That while Park City has taken the lead, the commitment was pre-COVID-19. Public transportation usage has declined. And what is a third wave with a pandemic? There have been really interesting air quality impacts, both in reduced personal transportation, but also sadly in public transportation. I am curious, related to that, Nick, what, as you guys recruit top employees to bring, here to Utah, you were mentioning in earlier comments how, you're really proud to have your office located here. What is it like for you, when you bring prospective employees in and it's really bad air quality, or, we're having a poor snow year, and does that make it difficult for you and to operate your company?
I mean, it certainly doesn't look great. There's no way to dance around it when we're having, sales meeting launches and intros with dealers and bringing dealers in to get them on snow, and the snow quality is poor or non-existent. It presents a whole nother challenge. And for us, we can speak all the techno babble until we're blue in the face and extol on the consumer benefits of the technologies we've been creating, but the proof's in the pudding. It's getting the product on the snow, right? In short, it's a challenge, and people notice it. And when we have, meetings in the winter and it's dry as a bone outside and we're talking about our product and trying to get our teams excited, we're trying to get our retail partners excited about what we're bringing into market, and it's green everywhere. Sorry, I got another call coming in. And it's green everywhere instead of white. It's not a good look. It's challenging, and the excitement's not there. But when we have a sales meeting and it's, there's a fresh blanket of snow out there, I mean, the energy is palpable. Everybody's excited. Everybody is, just fired up. We definitely are able to lure a lot of talent into our building just based on our location. But, when the weather's not cooperative, it loses its luster pretty quickly, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, we've got a couple minutes left. If anyone has anything else they'd want to say, I do want to end promptly at 2. I know India has to run another session, and Representative Handy has another meeting as well. But it's been really great to speak with you all today, and I want to thank all of the panelists for your insights. And it's really exciting to me to see what different people and companies and decision makers are doing to work on this, and really appreciate the chance to talk with you all about this.